Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is meeting number 81 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, Tuesday, November 28, 2017. I would remind everyone, and we have a large audience today, that today's proceedings are televised, and so I would kindly ask you that if you have a cell phone or other communication devices that you can mute, that you would please do that at this time or shut them right off. Today, we are studying Report 1, Phoenix Pay Problems, from the Fall 2017 reports of the Auditor General of Canada. As our witnesses this morning, we have from the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Marie Lemay, Deputy Minister, as well as Les Linkletter, Associate Deputy Minister. From the Office of the Auditor General of Canada, Mr. Michael Ferguson, the Auditor General of Canada, and Jean Goulet, Principal. From the Treasury Board Secretariat, we have Ms. Yaprak Baltachulu, and she is the Secretary of the Treasury Board of Canada. Also, Cécile Cleroux, welcome, Assistant Deputy Minister, Human Resources Management, Transformation Sector, Office of the Chief Human Resources Officer. I understand that we have a number of opening statements this morning, and we'll begin with the Auditor General, please.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, je veux...
Mr. Chair, thank you for this opportunity to present the results of our report on Phoenix Pay Problems.
Canada began to transform the way it processed pay for its 290,000 employees. Public Services and Procurement Canada was responsible for this transformation of pay administration initiative. The initiative had two projects. One to centralize pay services for 46 departments and agencies that employed about 70% of all federal employees, and the other to replace the 40-year-old pay system used by 101 departments and agencies with a new system called Phoenix. Since Phoenix went live in February 2016, the federal government frequently could not pay federal public servants accurately or on time. Our audit examined whether Public Services and Procurement Canada worked with selected departments and agencies to fix Phoenix pay problems so that government employees would receive their correct pay on time. This audit is important because the government's pay problems have had a financial effect on tens of thousands of its employees, and the system has to be fixed. We found that pay problems continued to grow throughout the period of our audit. A year and a half after the government launched the Phoenix pay system, the number of public servants waiting for a pay request to be processed had reached more than 150,000 in the 46 departments and agencies whose pay services were centralized. Those 150,000 employees were waiting for about 500,000 pay requests to be processed. Those numbers do not include the outstanding pay requests in the 55 departments and agencies whose pay services were not centralized, and also do not include the outstanding requests required by the recently signed collective agreement with federal public service unions.
Problems grew to the point that the value of outstanding pay errors totaled more than $500 million at the end of June 2017. This amount consisted of money that was owed to employees who had been underpaid, as well as money owed back to the government by other employees who had been overpaid. Departments and agencies struggled with Phoenix pay problems from the time the system went live. However, it took Public Services and Procurement Canada 4 months to recognize that the problems went beyond normal processing levels. Since that time, the department reacted to problems. It has implemented few permanent solutions. In fact, 16 months after the problems first arose, there was still no governance structure in place. In our opinion, there are two parts to the solution for the Phoenix pay problems. The first priority is to pay people the right amount on time. However, after that is achieved, there will still be work to do to get a system that processes pay efficiently. The longer-term solution needs to last and be as efficient as it can be. Public Services and Procurement Canada told us that it was developing a comprehensive plan, including detailed cost information, to resolve the pay issues. However, it had not finished that plan by the end of our audit. To put in place a viable solution to the pay system problems, the government needs to identify and address the root causes of the problems. It must also exercise strong oversight of the steps taken to resolve the problems and ensure that there is a strong collaboration that includes PSPC, the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, and the affected departments and agencies.
The system will take years and will cost more than the $540 million that government organizations have so far estimated they will spend to solve the problems. We found that the Department of Health in the Australian state of Queensland had to deal with a similar situation, and it took 8 years and over $1.2 billion to find solutions to most of its pay problems. We made 4 recommendations to Public Services and Procurement Canada and 2 recommendations to the Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. They both agreed with the recommendations. Monsieur le Président, je termine.
Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks, and we'll be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And we'll now turn to our Treasury Board Secretariat, Ms. Baltashulu.
Bonjour, merci de l'invitation pour être.
Good morning. Thank you for the invitation to appear for your committee this morning to discuss the Phoenix pay system. As the Secretary of the Treasury Board, I support the board in its role as the employer of the core public service. In this capacity, my senior management team and I are fully committed to doing our part in ensuring that public service employees are paid accurately. This is an unacceptable situation, one that has affected too many of our employees. I'd like to thank the Auditor General for his analysis and recommendations on how to stabilize the pay system. His report is important input to the work already underway.
There's 2 recommendations for Treasury Board Secretariat specifically. The first is that the Secretariat should establish with Public Services and Procurement Canada timelines for departments and agencies to submit accurate pay information and support PSPC and departments and agencies in the development of performance measures to track and report on the accuracy and timeliness of pay. We agree with this recommendation. In fact, we have already advanced work towards fulfilling this commitment. In collaboration with PSPC, we will establish standardized timelines for HR transactions that lead to a pay action by June 30th, 2018. We will also work with departments and agencies to establish and implement a comprehensive approach that links the HR world to actual pay processes. To better track and report on pay actions, we will set out performance measures that would be rolled out in fiscal year 2018-19. Finally, we will collaborate with departments and agencies to track and report on key HR metrics, including the timeliness of pay. The Auditor General's second recommendation for TBS is on costs. He recommends that the Secretariat, again with the support of PSPC and departments and agencies, should track and report on the costs of resolving pay problems and implementing a sustainable solution for all departments and agencies. We agree with this recommendation. The Comptroller General of Canada is leading a government-wide exercise to better understand the full picture of actual costs. Le travail est en cours.
Work is underway. It is a rigorous process based on international best practices. It will determine all costs incurred to date and put in place a framework to track future costs. It will involve significant consultation with departments and central agencies to ensure a proper understanding of the data. We expect this exercise to be completed by May 2018.
My department and the TBS senior management team are and have been fully engaged on this file. Les recommandations de
The Auditor General's recommendations and the resulting efforts to address them will contribute significantly to the work that is already underway. Mr. Chair, this concludes my remarks. I'd be pleased to answer the committee's questions.
For your presentation, and we'll now move to our Deputy Minister, Ms. Lemay.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I want to thank you and the members of the committee for the opportunity to address the report of the Auditor General with respect to the Phoenix Pay system. I'm pleased to be joined by my colleague, Les Linklater, who leads the integrated team that is now focused on stabilizing the pay system. Let me begin by saying that since my arrival at PSPC in April 2016, eliminating the negative impact on employees from the implementation of the pay transformation has been my #1 priority. The #1 priority of my department, and as Minister Qualtrough has noted, her #1 priority as well. It is clear to us that there is no greater issue facing the public service. More than half of the employees are facing some form of pay issue, and at my department, we see this firsthand, the very real impact this situation is having on employees, those waiting for missing pay or those working without rest to help resolve the situation. I'm deeply sorry for the hardship being felt by the public servants and their family. I want to thank the Auditor General for this important study. We agree with the report's finding and accept its recommendation. The report aligns with the findings of previous reviews and validates the measures that we're taking to stabilize the pay system. We have provided a management action plan which details specific commitments and key milestones for achieving them. J'en dirai plus long sur ces mesures dans quelques minutes, mais avant, j'aimerais...
I will elaborate on these actions in a few minutes, but first I'd like to provide a brief summary of what's transpired over the past year and a half. We know now that the original planning for this project failed to take into account the full scope and complexity of this major transportation. The crucial linkages between pay and associated HR processes and systems were not properly understood across government. This had enormous implications, and we did not immediately grasp the full extent and impact of pay problems that emerged after Phoenix went live. In addition, we did not have the needed resources to properly implement Phoenix or effectively manage the challenges that followed. By the time Phoenix was fully implemented in April 2016, more than 700 compensation positions had been eliminated and 46 departments being serviced by the Pay Centre. While departments were not serviced by the Pay Centre kept their staff, this massive reduction meant that valuable expertise and capacity were not available when we needed it most. At first, reports of pay errors were taken to be one-off issues and not unexpected within the implementation of a major transformation technology transformation project. However, by June, it became apparent that there were serious problems. The increasing number of pay issues quickly outstripped our capacity to respond.
Urgently needed. However, building capacity is a major undertaking, and we were starting from scratch. In addition to finding new employees, significant time and effort is needed to onboard, train these individuals. On June 17th, 8 weeks after full implementation, we announced the opening of our first satellite office. Then we hired additional staff at Miramichi, established additional satellite pay office across the country, added more than 250 compensation advisors, and opened a client contact center to handle employee calls for assistance. These measures helped address several urgent issues while ensuring that the 300,000 public servants were getting paid every 2 weeks. They reduced the occurrence of the most serious pay problems, employees not receiving pay at all. They also allowed us to bring down wait time for parental and disability leave, which unions asked us to prioritize. However, major challenges remain. A large queue of transactions had formed at the Pay Centre. At the same time, the government was concluding negotiations for 20 collective agreements. Compensation advisors process pay increases, signing bonus, and retroactive payments for some 184,000 employees, which led to payments of more than $615 million over the summer. Ce surplus de travail s'est avéré beaucoup plus compliqué.
This additional work proved much more complicated than expected. Calculating retroactive payments going back as far as 4 years required data to be pulled from the government's now decommissioned pay system, as well as significant manual calculations. We are not seeing our queue decrease as we are dedicating efforts to process important payments associated to collective bargaining agreements. However, in total, we are processing more transactions a month than we are receiving, and we have essentially tripled this output since May 2016. Once we will have implemented the collective agreements and dealt with the upcoming tax season, we'll be able to shift more capacity to reducing the queue. In addition to responding to pay problems, we are focusing on their root causes. This has
that human resource processes are directly linked with employee pay, we know that an integrated pay and HR approach is needed to address issues. Second, it's clear that our department alone could not identify or implement solutions. We needed a whole-of-government approach. As a result, we have begun implementing a series of measures focused on bringing the pay system to a point of stability. Our immediate aim is to reduce the number of late transactions and wait time for missing pay. Our actions fall into 4 broad areas, namely accountable and informed decision-making, improved processes and technology, increased capacity and service, and partnership and engagement. I will give you a few examples, but more detailed information on these actions is available on our website. An integrated team of senior officials from PSPC and Treasury Board Secretariat is now leading our overall effort to stabilize the pay system, both at the pay center and across the entire government. A strong governance model that brings together views and realities from across the public service is supporting the work of the integrated team. This includes a working group of ministers, an interdepartmental working group, and a Deputy Minister's Oversight Committee, which I co-chair with my colleague, Chief Human Resource Officer at the Treasury Board Secretariat. Pour améliorer les processus et la technologie, nous portons notre attention sur les pratiques.
To improve processes and technology, we're focusing on common HR practices, processes, and systems that don't work with Phoenix and cause delays. Our solution needs to be integrated, from initial staffing action to pay request and to pay receipt. Taking a holistic view will ensure that our pay system works effectively and efficiently from start to finish. At the Pay Center, we are preparing to organize compensation staff into small groups that will focus on specific departments and agencies, creating greater efficiencies and providing more tailored support to employees. To increase our capacity and improve service, we have hired an additional 680 compensation staff. This represents more than double the staff complement we had when Phoenix was launched. We plan to add up to 300 more over the next several months. Recognizing the need to provide more useful support to employees, we also plan to enhance our contact center by hiring up to 100 employees. This will allow employees to get detailed information about their pay files directly from public servants working with the client contact center.
Are engaged, and the Union Management Committee has been meeting regularly to discuss Phoenix-related issues and solutions. Improved reporting and data analysis will be provided to department and agency and will inform decision-making. So, Mr. Chair, we know that there is no quick fix. There are no quick fixes or shortcuts. We need to continue to pay some 300,000 employees every 2 weeks and process the transactions that are late. We are focused on stabilizing Phoenix, and the measures I have just mentioned will help us get us there. Again, more details can be found on our website. These measures are fully aligned with the Auditor General's recommendation, and we will be posting quarterly updates of them online. In addition, we are looking longer term to consider options for how we can increase the efficiency and sustainability of the system. Our immediate focus is on helping affected employees, but eventually we want to deliver an efficient pay system that provides public servants a modern and easy-to-use pay experience. Collectively, it's clear that we underestimated the complexity of the pay transformation initiative. The Goss-Gilroy review identifies lessons in key areas that we're now using to fix the pay system. The second report of the Auditor General should provide additional guidance. It is also our responsibility to ensure that these lessons will be applied to other government transformation projects. Alors, avant de conclure, je tiens encore une fois à souligner la patience.
Before concluding my remarks, I would like to again acknowledge the patience of dedicated public servants who've endured hardship through no fault of their own. They simply want to know when they're going to get paid. While we do not have a precise timeline, we are doing everything we can to end this frustrating situation as quickly as possible. I'd also like to thank our dedicated employees at PSPC and across departments and agencies who are working tirelessly to ensure that their colleagues are paid accurately and on time. I know that these pay issues are exerting pressure and stress on employees. Where employees are facing hardship situations, we are prioritizing support. I would like to assure you that when these situations are brought to our attention, departments and agencies act quickly to deal with them. I'd be happy now to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all for your comments. I'll just quickly state that I represent a riding in Alberta, a rural riding with not a lot of public servants, and calls into my constituency office on the Phoenix pay system are now more than on immigration. And I can tell you that most members of parliament in urban areas, their immigration files are very high. In my rural area, it's about 65–70% Phoenix pay in my rural riding are now. And I thank you, Ms. LeMay, for recognizing the hardships that have been caused through this, because I can tell you when we have constituency staff, all of us could tell the same stories. When we have constituency staff that are dealing with these hardships day after day after day, it takes a toll on staff as well. And so thank you for your comments in regard to that. We're going to move into the first round of questioning to Ms. Mendez. Ms. Mendez, please, you have 7 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci à vous.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being with us here this morning. Obviously, first and foremost, we're looking at the general aspect of Mr. Ferguson's report, which is how are these government processes affecting people? And in this case, we have to look at how it's affecting the entire federal public service. When we decided, the government of Canada, to change the pay system, which was outdated, everyone agrees that the system had to be changed, there was a lack of preparation. It wasn't really expected. It happens elsewhere when they change systems, and there are lessons that can be learned. So I find this extremely painful for the entire federal public service that they had to live with the consequences of these errors simply because, based on what I'm reading and hearing, that we did not do our due diligence on this when we decided to move to such a different pay system that there was in the past. I think that your comments, Ms. May, are in fact most welcome by public servants, but nevertheless, they are experiencing painful situations right now. I'm not even talking about people who aren't being fully paid what they're owed. I'm talking about people who are being overpaid as well and are currently asking to reimburse rather sizable sums of money, but who have not been able to do so, and it's affecting their access to some types of credits or loans, such as the Canada Child Benefit. I don't have the term in French, I'm sorry. So they were cut off from these benefits, and now we're asking them to pay money back that they don't have. So how can you respond to these employees? Ms. LeMay? Thank you for your question. First, I just wanted to repeat that everyone is being affected by the implementation of the Phoenix pay system. And it's also difficult for us to imagine how affected people are by this. We receive questions and comments every day. What I can tell you is that last summer, the priority was really on paying people who weren't paid, people who were on mat leave, who were on disability, So we had to prioritize paying these people, and we didn't have the capacity that we should have had for this transition. So we had to choose who we'd pay first. Overpayments at that time were not the priority. It was obviously people who weren't being paid at all. So overpayments are now becoming a growing challenge for employees and an increasingly stressful one. And what we've done is to implement a process, and this process means that if the overpayment is more than 10%, we won't recover the payment unless we've reached an agreement with the employee. Nevertheless, as with any system, there are exceptions. There are cases that were brought to our attention where the system didn't work, but these are exceptions. The rule for most cases is that we don't recover the money until we've reached an agreement with the employee to make sure that they got everything they received. You understand how this also affects other elements of their life as well. Yes, the only thing, there was a unit set up by the Treasury Board Secretariat to help people if they were affected for other programs. If money is owed to them, there is a claims unit that they can turn to respond to their needs. In my opinion, what affects people the most is the human factor in this whole story. We're still, a year and a half later, running up against the fact that we don't really have a concrete problem to solve the situation. I understand that it's complex and that right now you'd want to really give us a precise date about when we're going to be able to solve this. You don't want to say that it'll be such and such a date, but based on what you've given us for your action plan and actions that you've taken to solve this issue, do we not yet have a idea of what kind of time period we're looking at to be able to look at a minimum of homogeneity in the system? If you allow, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to do a small comparison with last year. Now we have much more capacity than in the past. There are roughly 700 employees that were hired. We're able to respond to employee requests. We have a unit in place, and we also have greater reporting and analyses capacity. We weren't able to make the right decisions at the time, but now we have an integrated team, as I mentioned, with the Treasury Board Secretariat, and my colleague leads a team that integrates our two teams. And this is very important because now we have a pan-governmental approach, a holistic approach that takes into account the complexity of these issues. And we have implemented measures that are being proposed, rather, that will allow us to decrease the waiting times, the number of transactions, etc. And what we're seeing, for example, in June, July, we saw the number of transactions decrease in the queue. And then we put a lot of emphasis on collective agreement transactions. This is not a negative thing. I'm happy that we were able to integrate to these transactions, but there are retroactive payments, signing bonus, and this was money for employees, and we had to do this. It was very important. But since we spent so much time on this, the transaction queue outstanding started to increase. So until we have finished with the collective agreement transactions, we do not think that the outstanding transaction queue will decrease. 2016, 2017 will also be a more difficult period, but as soon as we've gotten over these years, we think we'll be much better positioned to work on the transactions in the queue.
I'll move to Monsieur Dantel. Vous avez 7 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the House of Commons this morning. And our thoughts go first and foremost to the thousands of Canadians that are currently suffering because of the Phoenix pay system. As Ms. Mendez was saying earlier, we knew that we had to update the system that was 40 years old, and we knew that we had to update a system that was very fragile and affected so many people. In 2015, on two occasions, as set out in this document, the government on two occasions delayed the implementation of the Phoenix pay system to avoid issues that unfortunately occurred. So on February 24th, 2016, the minister hit the button to start the Phoenix pay system with all the problems that ensued. Ms. Lemay, did you advise the minister to go forward with the system? Thank you for your question. I started my position on April 11th, 2016, so I wasn't there to give this recommendation, but I was informed of the situation. I can give the information that I have. In fact, the minister at the time, Ms. Foote, was briefed on the topic. The briefing occurred at the end of February. The question wasn't to go forward with the system or not. It was that the system was ready, and the study that was conducted by a third party said that we had to proceed with it. We checked with other departments, and everyone was ready, and we were supposed to proceed with it on February 24th, so we did so. Okay. However, there was a report on January 20th, 2016 that didn't exactly say that. In this report, there are 124 analyses that were done, and out of these 124, there were 58 that revealed that there was a security problem, a major one with the system, and nevertheless, you still went ahead with it. Why did you ignore the recommendations in this report that said roughly half of the elements in the system were problematic in a major scale? Which report are you mentioning in particular, because there were several? The summary of Phoenix testing results, 3.1, 2016. What I can tell you, based on the Treasury Board Directorate, before it was launched, this was a third-party report that was done, and it recommended that the benefits of moving ahead outstripped the risks of delaying it. As you said, we delayed the launch of Phoenix because in the fall there were some issues that were found and that had to be corrected. But when we did, at the end of January, present the committee, the Deputy Minister, with the report, there were some issues, but they weren't critical issues. And then there were 124 faults, if I'm not mistaken. But in the current system, there are roughly 1,000. At that time, we deemed that there were mitigation efforts that were implemented. Mr. Deltel, if I may, I'd like to make a side note here. One of the challenges we had with this project was that each of the measures were examined separately. We're talking about 124 at a certain time, and every time we had issues that were brought forward, there were mitigation measures implemented. But no one had an overall view of the entire project and of the risks involved. And I think there was a risk accumulation at that time. It's still too bad that this 20 January report was not taken into account. You're talking about things that were analyzed in silo for 124 people. But on January 13, 2016, you met with the director.
Aidez-moi à clarifier, Monsieur le Président.
Allow me to clarify, Mr. Chair. The objective of today's committee is to examine the AG's report and his conclusions, which is from the time the system was started to now. So we all would like to go back, and we will have a chance to do so because the AG is going to table another report later. But my question for you now is, today, should we not focus on the AG's report that covers the period from when the Phoenix program was started to today? We'd all like to make sure we find solutions, and we could look back, but we won't be able to solve the problem this way. We have to look forward and look at the AG's reports.
We will be coming with another report in the spring in regards to the timelines that were missed and failed. I think, though, that what Monsieur Deltel is trying to do is he's saying that there was reports there that weren't listened to, and if departments are going to say that the Phoenix pay system is ready, and then it puts the government, it puts everyone in a bad light. So I think we'll have to be aware that the Auditor General will be coming with another report in the spring, but I think you're laying the foundation as to what the Auditor General says in his report.
Yes, and may I remark, Mr. Speaker, that on point 1.6, we're talking about the launch of this, the startup of this problem. So this is why I addressed the issue just a few days and few weeks before, not
so carry
years
on.
Before.
That won't be taken out of your time.
As my time is passing by, but I will get back. But let me get back to the report du rapport du 20 janvier.
Back to the January 20 report. Out of the 58 elements mentioned that involved major problems, and roughly 90% of these 154 problems identified said that for the implementation date, they weren't sure how many problems were sensitive. How come, with such a shocking report that said almost half of the issues were major and we weren't sure when we'd be able to solve them, how come with such a report you still decided to move forward with the system? Mr. Deltel, as I was saying, I wasn't there at the time, but from what I've understood, there were many reports and a lot of work that was done. And as you know, this is a complex issue, and there were a lot of people involved. What I have been told is that the various challenges that were mentioned, they were mitigated. Everyone knew that such a big transformation could have a few challenges. No one would have imagined that it was such a scope as we've seen today. But we would not have advised to move forward with the pay system if we had known the situation would be such as it is today. People convinced the minister that the risk mitigation measures had been implemented. Thank you. Mr. Chair, nevertheless, a little bit later, when we launched the second phase of the system, there were no signs that were indicating that these problems hadn't been solved. The 58 major problems that were identified prior to the launch were still there and still didn't have a date as to when they would be fixed. There were roughly 8 weeks between the two launches, so 4 pay periods. Of course, there were challenges that were mentioned, as I said in the beginning, but these challenges were perceived as being normal with the implementation of such a major transformation. We revalidated with our colleagues, because we didn't, PSPC didn't operate the system alone. We checked at the deputy minister's table to make sure if everyone was confident to move forward with the system, and everyone was at the time confident that we could move to phase 2.
Mr. Christofferson, please. You have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say that the scale of the government incompetence and its negative impact on Canadian citizens is mind-boggling. I've been around a long time, but I have to really, really search my memory to remember a file that was as bad as this one in terms of its the governance and its negative impact on Canadian citizens, the ones that work for this government and for Canadians. And it's ongoing still. Normally, we're looking in the past and we're looking at past damage. As we're here today, there's still ongoing damage. And I got to say, Chair, that at the outset, that a lot of the answers that we're getting are not sufficient. There's still way too much gray area and unknown, and I'm hoping that we stay at this until we get the answers we need, because the main goal for us is to make sure, get this fixed, and bloody well make sure it doesn't happen again. I want to say, first of all, to Deputy LeMay, thank you for the apology. You said, "I am deeply sorry for the hardship being felt by public servants and their families." That alone doesn't change anything, but I know it matters, and that's appreciated, and I wanted to acknowledge it. I would also just say that I was disappointed that the Treasury Board, that has overall responsibility, didn't feel the same need to come in and apologize. Where do you begin? IBM is who was hired to implement Phoenix, correct?
Yes.
So let's start with, how much culpability does IBM have in this versus the government?
Do you want to take that, Liz?
Thank you for the question. We entered into a contract with IBM in 2011 after an open and transparent process. IBM provided a bid that met all of the mandatory requirements, and we entered into a contract under authorities from Treasury Board to be able to design and then build and implement Phoenix. At this point, the task authorization construct of the contract held, and IBM performed the required work that PSPC, as the project sponsor manager, provided to the company to be able to build and implement the system.
You didn't answer my question, and I don't know what the heck task authorization construct is. I asked, who is culpable? How culpable is IBM versus how culpable is the government? You didn't come anywhere near answering. Please answer.
Can I try?
Please.
Okay. I'll give you a bit of an example. It's the way the contract was structured is that we would give a task to IBM, and they come back to us with this task. If there are issues, it's like any contract, we can hold money, but when the task is complete, then we pay them. It's a little bit, and pardon me for the example, but it's a little bit like if you build a house and, okay, we decide on the foundation, you build the foundation, it's okay. Then we, PSPC, as the project manager, would then say, okay, these are the type of walls, does it make sense? Then we give a task to IBM, they do the task, and they come back and they give us the task. If it's meeting the requirements that we've set up for this particular part of the job, then they have. So the answer is that throughout the project, IBM has done what we have asked them to do. Now, we were the project managers, they were not. They were the integrator, which is different than certain other projects. Again, I go back to the cumulative effect of risk and issues in this project, but it's not IBM that was the project manager on this one.
All right, so you're saying that IBM is not to be held in a major way to account. It resides with government. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. We could have got there a lot quicker. Deputy, in your opening remarks, you said that you agree with the AG, as every deputy does that ever darkens the doorway here. And yet, the Auditor General has a conflicting opinion from your department. Your department believes that you're going to be able to clear this up with about $500 million, give or take, in 3 years. The Auditor General says you're not going to be able to do it for that amount. You're not going to be able to do it in that length of time. And yet, in your opening remarks, you said we agree with the Auditor General. So which is it?
Well, I don't believe that we have actually put forward the finalization of the plan and the budget that we'll take to get us to the end state. So it's hard to agree on finances on that point. We haven't finished that work.
I'd like the Auditor General's thoughts on that, Chair, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What we put in the report was based on a survey that we had done of the departments. You know, the money that had already been spent, the money that they expected to spend. So that was the $540 million, and we asked them for their projections over a 3-year time period. So those numbers were numbers that we put together. They weren't the numbers of the department. But even based on that, we felt that it was going to take longer. And again, remembering that what we're looking at is not just how long it's going to take to pay people the right amount on time, but also how long is it going to take to get to an efficient system after sort of the individual problems have been reduced, there will still be a lot of work to do to get the system to the point where it's efficient, and that's why we believe it's going to cost more than the $540 million that departments told us that they have either spent or they plan to spend.
Thank you. And Deputy, your thoughts on that?
I agree with the Auditor General.
You also come in with that tattooed on
But
your
it's
forehead.
very
We agree
true.
with the Auditor General. Thanks very much. Goodbye.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. My goodness. Well, I'll get you warmed up. I'm going to be coming back to this business of comparing with Australia and how quickly they both identified the problem and how quickly they put together a comprehensive plan that the government is telling me they still don't have right now. So if not one of my colleagues, I'll be coming back there. So give some thought to that. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Christofferson. We'll now move to Monsieur Massé. Monsieur Massé, vous avez 7 minutes.
I have 7 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to echo the comments of my colleague, Mr. Deltel. Obviously, our thoughts go to all of the public servants that are being affected by these pay issues. However, I reacted earlier because we could all reinvent history and try to correct it and go back in the past, but it doesn't change anything. From what I've understood from Ms. May is that the decision to hit the switch on Phoenix in February was taken because there were no other options. It was taken because there was a regional pay system that was more than 40 years old. And this system, with our Ms. Fraser, who was the predecessor of the current Auditor General, who said in the report,
consequences. Évidemment, elle pouvait pas se projeter dans le futur.
Obviously, she couldn't predict the future, and a decision was made, and the on switch was turned on. Today, my question is for Ms. May or Mr. Linklater. If, for whatever reason, if we had a magic wand, and if all the outstanding transactions were solved today, can PeopleSoft, the system, the IBM system, does it work? Can it work?
Excusez-moi, Monsieur Massé. Ce que je dirais là-dessus, c'est que...
Mr. Massé, I'd like to go back to the fact that PeopleSoft is working. It is working for the federal service, and a lot of companies use it. In the context of these transactions, yes, there are challenges that have to be resolved, and I'll ask Mr. Linklater to talk between the links between the HR processes. But I'd like to talk for 2 minutes about a culture within the federal government that has caused challenges. For processing outstanding transactions, we've always dealt with them. For example, if people did overtime, they wouldn't be paid the next week. It would take months to do so. So if someone does have an interim process position, it doesn't get entered in the system right away. It happens later on. And this means transactions weren't processed in real time. There are also manual transactions that were complicated, and this is what created challenges. And now a lot of this has been automated, and I think it will work, but perhaps Mr. Linklater could talk more about this. I understand, Ms. LeMay, I spent 16 years in the public service, and I was paid every 2 weeks, and I understand very well all the processes associated with the federal payment system. And once again, my question is very simple. Does the pay system, if we were to solve all the outstanding transactions, is the system working today? Yes, the system is working, of course. But aside from the technology, there are big challenges that have to be solved with the HR processes. Yes, you answered my question. Now, today, in June, the AG's office determined that there were 495,000 transactions outstanding. Where are we now? Now, at the Pay Center, as of 18 October, there are 120,000 outstanding transactions. What's your game plan and your action plan? In my caucus, we want to make sure we have a solid game plan to solve all the issues that are solved, to make sure that all public servants can be paid as quickly as possible what's owed to them. So what's your concrete, tangible game plan? If the system is working, as you say, and all transactions from today forward are being done correctly, what's your game plan to solve all the outstanding issues? We're increasing our capacity with on-the-ground HR agents. We're also working on the implementation of collective agreements and on the tax season for this year. With this increase in capacity, we believe that we will have the capacity to tackle these outstanding transactions at the pay center. At the same time, the team that I'm leading is examining the HR processes that could be improved to improve the pay process. I'm sorry to interrupt you because I only have 7 minutes. I only have a minute and a half left. I know the Federal Public Service very well. There are brilliant people and talented people who have much expertise. There are 300 public servants on the federal level. They're all dedicated to managing programs of the federal government. So with the resources that you have right now in your organization, can you tell us, based on this game plan, when will we be able to have a pay system that works and that deals with all the transactions? I'm not even talking about workarounds and bridges. When will public servants be able to be paid what is owed to them? As the Auditor General mentioned in his report, this is a long-term process. We are developing measures now that will be launched or have already been launched to remedy the most important stresses on the system. The most important thing is to increase our capacity and to change our processes, and this will improve things for employees. Obviously, I have a hard time, to be very frank, I know I only have 30 seconds left. I have a hard time understanding why in front of this committee and based on the AG's reports and all the studies that were done and all the expertise that there is, that with all the expertise that our public servants have, I don't understand why we don't have a game plan that says when we're going to solve all of these problems by a specific date. I don't understand. So what I'd like to know from your department, I'd like you to come back to our committee with a game plan and a specific date as to when the problems will be solved. I'd like to be able to tell public servants when we'll be able to solve all our pay problems.
Monsieur Massé, I would just also mention to our committee that it was circulated yesterday when we received it, the game plan, the timelines laid out as far as achievement. And so we have some of that. However, I think your question was very good, Mr. Massé, that we wanted something more distinct. Mr. McCauley, we're into the second round of questioning. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, in your opinion, was PSPC open and transparent about the Phoenix fiasco?
Well, I think the thing that we identified really was that they didn't understand the size of the problem that they were facing. They didn't recognize the size of the problem. So I think that, perhaps the messaging was that the system, they were going to be able to solve the problems by October of 2016. And I think that was what they truly believed at the time. So I think it was more an issue of they didn't understand the size of what they were dealing with rather than anything else.
Okay. Your report says that PSPC, as you mentioned, underestimated the scale of the fiasco. It took months to even recognize there was a problem. It's taken over a year to establish a plan, which hasn't been published yet. In response to your report, I'm going to quote their word salad from PSPC. They're going to implement a multi-phased evergreen suite of measures and an HR to pay integrated plan to improve pay issues that recognizes the causes and nature of government-wide, et cetera, et cetera. Now, given your experience with the problems of the management of PSPC addressing Phoenix, do you think this is a reasonable response to your report and the issues you've stated?
Well, we haven't looked at what they're planning on doing in sort of the whole HR to pay environment. What I would say, though, is, that the department will need to examine very closely the risks of taking on the additional part of the project, that HR to pay piece, right? So by adding the HR piece, that adds more complexity. And I think that they need to make sure that they have well examined the risks. That may be part of the solution that is required, but it also could add complexity to what they're trying to do to solve the problem. So again, we haven't audited that, but the fact that they're now moving into an HR to pay environment, I think perhaps expands the scope of the project, and they need to understand the risks that they're taking on.
You've stated several times in your report that PSPC underestimated or misreported the amount of problems that we had. Number of outstanding pay requests that we calculated was 29% higher than reported by PSPC. We've seen that as well repeatedly in our committee meetings, where we've heard when there was 80,000 backlog, we reported in committee just 77 issues. Why do you think PSPC was so far out? Do you believe they're misleading Canadians or just lack of competence? I mean, we reportedly brought it up in committee. We heard repeated briefings. We've turned the corner. We've done it. We've almost reached steady state, and yet this whole time the problem was growing larger and larger. Why do you think that was?
Well, the difference between our two numbers and our number being 29% higher was we counted essentially all transactions that needed to be processed by the pay center. So even if something was, for example, a duplicate, we counted it because somebody in the pay center actually needs to go through all of the transactions to figure out which things are duplicates. So we were looking at it not just from the point of view of the people that are waiting to get paid and the people that have been under or overpaid. We were also looking at it from the point of view of the people in the Miramichi Pay Center and what's the size of the work that they have to deal with. So I think, we're not disputing the number that PSPC put together, but we felt that it was just providing one picture into the whole problem, and we felt that you really need to start with, well, what's the total size of the problem? What's the total amount of work that needs to be done? And then from there, that can be broken down.
Do you think the way you tracked it and PSPC tracked it led to their underestimating the size of the issue? Or were they willfully ignoring it, do you think? Because again, we've seen where we saw 80,000, in reality, we were being told it's only 77 outstanding to pay and 500 total. And this was 5 months after, or 4 months after the original start of Phoenix.
Well, again, I think that the problem was that initially they felt that they could resolve those pay requests for the 82,000 people they originally identified, thought they could get those all resolved by October 2016. And, I think then discovered that that was a larger task than they expected. And in the meantime, while they were trying to resolve those, additional requests were coming in and the problem got worse. So, again, I think it was very much not identifying the size of the problem early enough in the process.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCauley. We'll come back. And Mr. Area, please, now you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know personally that there are very talented public service employees in my riding of Nepean, in Ottawa-Gatineau, and elsewhere in Canada. These are very highly qualified and they got great deal of expertise. Somehow I have a feeling that they were not involved, they were not consulted in designing of the system or in development of the system or in implement of the system. I know that one of the root causes for the big mess we are in is that the over-reliance of the federal government on outside contractors. According to a report, I believe federal government spent $2.7 billion on IT staffing, bringing in professionals from outside rather than relying on trained public servants. Alex Baine, the Canada's Chief Information Officer, Alex Baine, the Canada's Chief Information Officer, said more investment is required in better preparing internal IT staff to address the needs of the Government of Canada. I think that is what one of the root causes, in my opinion. Now, the unions, the Professional Institute of Public Service of Canada, which represent, I think, about 50,000 employees, now they want government to scrap the Phoenix system and start from scratch. I think PIP's president, Debbie Davu, said, give us a year and we'll build a working replacement for this troubled system. I understand that the Public Service Alliance of Canada is also in support of this. Have you had, to the Deputy Minister, Mary Lemay, have you had any discussions on this issue? Please keep it short. I got very short time.
So just to say that we've been working closely with the unions, I know since I've been there anyways, and recently I know that my colleague Les did have conversations with PIPs.
Okay, thank you. You said that we are the project manager, but so basically you're giving clean chit to IBM. So if we are the project manager, then the responsibility is with us. So let me ask, how many people were fired for this mess we are in, which has cost taxpayers at the least $540 million?
Fired? I can't answer that.
Okay. How many people have been demoted?
I wouldn't be able to tell you at this point.
How many people have been disciplined? Or how many people had their performance bonus cut? Because we are the project manager, it is our responsibility.
So I can tell you that on the performance pay, we had this discussion at one of the committees previously. For the, you know how performance pay works every year. Okay. There's objectives. Okay. So there are some measures that were taken for the 15-16.
In addition to IBM, I'm sure we had so many other consultants who advised at various stages. I'm sure you hired consultants who tested this or at least made a review of the system before they said it is ready to go. How many of these consultants have been blacklisted?
Not able to answer your question. I could go back and give you those information.
My concern is that, I have a lot of public service employees who have got very good expertise. I have a constituent who has got more than 20 years of experience both in the federal government and outside in IT system. He says, I quote, the pension system is getting bad data from Phoenix and may eventually collapse. I don't know, this is just one anecdotal thing I've heard. I'm very, very much concerned. With my limited time, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask AG, who is responsible for the loss of at the least $540 million to the taxpayer?
Okay, so, again, what we have is a system that was implemented that didn't work. This audit was not about trying to identify who made what decisions and who was responsible for what. We're going to come back and revisit the decision in the second audit. All I can tell you at this point is that when this system was put in place, it wasn't ready to process the transactions that it was asked to process, and now there's a lot of time and effort and money that is being spent on trying to get the system back to where it needed to be.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Area. We'll now move back to Monsieur Daltel.
Mr. Speaker, so I want to continue on some report. Le 13 janvier 2016.
On January 13th, 2016, there were a meeting with all the directors and CFOs in several departments. And during this meeting, they said that they analyzed the situation with Phoenix, and they said where they were a few weeks before the system was launched. And here's the results. Correctional Services talked about workers that work shifts, and the tests that were done meant that 50% of tests were successful, and that means the other 50% were not. which is an important situation.
From analysis on error on page sheet and training at the last minute. Plus loin, vous avez le ministère de l'Agriculture qui a conclu qu'il y avait également...
Further, the Department of Transportation of Agriculture said the same thing. They weren't sure how to solve the issues that were there at the time of the analysis. There's a question of the Department of Social Development. It noted that the relevance of the system and its accuracy was questionable after the 25 tests that they conducted. Also, the RCMP.
The error rate is going up. Public safety, exactly the same thing. Testing result issue, 30% of error, not satisfactory. The RCMP also talked about the fact that test over promotion over time failed. What will be the workaround? La garde côtière parlait des conséquences.
Coast Guard also talked about the consequences if Phoenix were delayed. And Social Development said...
Bref, Monsieur le Président, dans ce rapport où tous les directeurs...
This report, where all the directors of departments that this was done a few weeks before the system was implemented, it showed that there were still major issues. Earlier, Ms. Lemay, you said in the previous reports, one of the errors was that everyone was working in silos. But in the current case, this was a meeting that united all the directors of the departments that were going to implement the Phoenix pay system. Why did the department not listen to these severe warnings that were given by people who were going to have to deal with these issues?
Alors, Monsieur Deltel.
So, Mr. Deltel, these comments were heard, probably. We did have a meeting at the end of January with all the deputy ministers before we made the decision to move forward with Phoenix. And everyone was assured that the various measures were taken to mitigate the problems. So our colleagues from the Treasury Board and us, we decided together to move forward. So this was after this meeting. So I think that these factors were mentioned, and I can tell you that on our side, our employees were convinced that the mitigation measures were implemented.
Following that meeting, there were a number of those kind of meetings with the heads of HR and heads of with CFOs. As the issues arose, that's why Treasury Board Secretariat hired another third party, which the report I think you were referring to. Again, as Ms. Lemay has said, that there was a deputy minister's meeting at the end of January. At that meeting, we asked the departments the following question: do you feel as a department you are ready to get on to Phoenix? At the same time, PSBC presented that the system was ready. Each individual deputy minister themselves, for their department, they were asked to be ready. The majority of the deputy ministers at the time, given the balance of the knowledge that they had, felt that the Phoenix system, should it go forward, that they would be ready to onboard to Phoenix. And the decision was taken by PSPC to do the first phase and the second phase with the input of the deputy minister's sense of their readiness.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have a lot of respect to democracy. If the majority win, that's fine. But we're not talking here about a majority. We're talking here about the fact that we need a strong level of safety. It's not 50% plus one in that case. What was because you talk about it, what was the exact result of how many under sous-ministre said it's okay, and how many said not go, no go? How many of the people said go? How many people said not go?
There were no no-goes. There were two departments that felt that they were not sure if we were ready to go because they didn't have a good enough sense of the testing results for their department.
I'll move to Mr. Whalen. Welcome, Mr. Whalen, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Deltel referred to the Gardner and SI reports which were available to the Department in January 2016, and which I understand from the House of Commons Committee on Operations and Estimates, where I asked a similar question before, that the Minister was not provided these documents until September 2016. Will your next report help clarify for us whether information available to the Department was withheld from the Minister?
Well, I can't tell you at this point. I mean, what we're going to do is we're going to get access to all of the information, and we're in the process of getting access to all of the information.
Well, I think, Mr. Ferguson, I think it would be excellent if you found in your deliberations that Mr. Deltel's documents were actually not made available to the Minister until 6 months after the decisions were made. I think it would be helpful to our committee to know that. I'm just going to slide on now to some of the underlying axioms here are that that there would be cost savings from transferring the 40-year-old system to a new system, and that somehow now the department appreciates that it has the right level of staffing. And I'd like to challenge a couple of those. What will happen, Mr. Linklater, to the 200 pay experts who are currently working on collective agreement implementation?
Once those agreements have been fully implemented, we'll move that capacity onto the queue.
And how many collective agreements are there?
At this point, we're working to implement 20.
No, how many across all of government?
Oh, across all of government? I'd have to defer to the Treasury Board on that number.
Core Public Service, 27.
And in the system?
Sorry?
In the system? Expected to be covered by Phoenix?
Expected to be covered by Phoenix. By the time we do all of public service, it will be 80. 80.
So you're working on a quarter of them right now, is that correct? And how many, how long do you...
But the size of the bargaining units varies considerably.
Well, it's not really implementing the collective agreement isn't necessarily just the size. There's also a baseline amount for just implementing the rules. Isn't that the case?
There's a certain amount of programming that needs to be done for retroactive payments, yes.
So it's sort of like base time and effort required then plus implementation across on a per public servant basis?
Correct.
Okay. So about how much % of the work do you think you will have done on implementing collective agreements by the end of this year?
By the end of the calendar year, I think we'll be very close to completion.
Of the 20?
Of the 20.
But what percentage of the overall work in implementing 100% of it does that represent?
That depends on collective bargaining processes, sir.
Mr. Whalen, we have to negotiate the deals.
Right, but they will be negotiated, correct?
Yes, we're hoping they will be negotiated, and that'll be future work. You're
sure,
right.
So I understand, Ms. Buglaccio. I'm just going to continue with Mr. Linklater because he says he's going to dedicate 200 employees to other work, and I don't think there's any real legitimate timeline, and I'm going to try to establish that through my questions, on which that can happen. So when will the other 55 departments and agencies come online into Phoenix who aren't already covered? And who would do that work?
Well, that would be a decision that ministers would need to take once the system is stable.
Sure, but presumably the 200 people you're currently using are, crisis managed, they're worked on difficult aspects of the system, and they would be ideal candidates to help with future difficult work, things like implementing the 55 new departments, things like rolling forward the 60 other collective agreements that haven't yet been implemented in the system. And what about future negotiations? So each of these collective agreements is only 4 years long. So every 48 months, you're going to have to re-implement 2. Like every month for over the 48-month period, there's about, on average, 2 that need to get re-implemented in the system. Isn't that correct?
I just want to add one thing. That 55 departments, all departments are on Phoenix right now. Everybody uses Phoenix. It's the pay center that only 46 departments are serviced by, and the second phase has been put on hold until I can't see when right now. So that's.
But presumably these 200 employees who are battle tested in the crisis management associated with collective agreement implementation will be perfect candidates to roll over into completing the rest of the hard work, Mr. Linklater?
They would better be on transactions at first. That's our priority.
Given the scope of the work at the Pay Center, we'll dedicate the resources to the most complicated work that we have at the Pay Center.
Right. So I don't see when those 200 employees ever get dedicated to the backlog. So since the end of the Auditor General's report, the Auditor General noted that the amount of backlog grew over the entire course of his study period. Has it continued to grow since then?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. I will now move to Mr. Christopherson, please.
Those are great questions. That was very impressive, Mr. Whalen. You know, one of the things I observe is from listening to my staff talk about this, just like Google, which started as a noun, became a verb, Phoenix, which starts as a noun, is also now a verb. People that work for the government talk about being phoenixed. Part of the regular lexicon here on the Hill. You've been phoenixed. It's like the worst thing that can happen to you. Anyway, I want to move on to when the problems first started surfacing, and I'd signaled ahead of time that I was going to come back to this issue of the comparator with Australia. And of course, it can't be a direct comparison, that we understand that. But certainly it's close enough that the Auditor General has offered it up as a comparison. And so it took this government 4 months to realize there was a problem, a systemic problem. So for 4 months, the government focused on the smoke while the house burned down. In Australia, in 4 months, they had a comprehensive plan in, comprehensive plan in place. 16 months later here, we still don't have a comprehensive plan. So tell me how it is that we are so much more incompetent in dealing with this than a government that is a fraction the size of Canada's.
So part of your answer is in your last statement, but it is this transformation is a large one. In terms of the plan and the initiatives, I think unless my colleague talk about this, but we do have some measures that have been identified and are being processed, and you have some of the timelines in the action plan. In terms of Queensland, just to say that when we were doing the contract, we did look at other places where PeopleSoft had been used and where IBM had worked. And at that time, the timing, I guess, of Queensland and us did not particularly work out for the RFP. Although once we launched, and this is, I think, your question, I remember that. Remember that we were in a real crisis management. Remember that we had no capacity and we were really making sure that people that weren't getting paid were getting paid. But I personally have met with some university professors that were doing a study on Queensland actually at the beginning of September to have a conversation with them to see, have you found anything that we're not doing, that they're doing? And at the time, everything that we saw that they were doing, we had started doing and we were actioning. So the delay, again, after the launch, we were 8 weeks, we were announcing our satellite office and we were in capacity building mode. The first thing, no matter what, was getting the capacity back up. That was the first thing that we had to do. We will have to get the system efficient, but we needed the capacity to be able to take the pain away, and that's what we're still trying to do.
I just want to mention, Chair, I'm hoping, and I think you'll find that there's going to be agreement that we would have at least a second hearing to delve into all of this, because again, we're getting superficial answers. But you're signaling that my time is running out on this, and there's a lot more drilling down to do on this. I mean, the fact that they had the Australian model to go by, and the Australians still were able to do it fresh in 4 months. I mean, it does speak to the competency of the two bureaucracies. So we'll come back to this again. Thanks, Chair.
Mr. Christopherson, we'll now move to Mr. Chen, please. Mr. Chen, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, the Auditor General reminded us that government departments are too focused on their own activities instead of the perspective of the people that we serve. So I want to start off by thanking Ms. LeMay for highlighting the negative impact, the hardship, that this Phoenix implementation has had on our public servants. I empathize with the tens of thousands of employees who have not been paid properly, whether they're underpaid, overpaid, or waiting for other types of adjustments. But they are not the only people that are outraged at what is happening. When Canadians hear from the Auditor General that $540 million is what's needed at the minimum to fix the Phoenix system, they too deserve an apology. And my colleague, Mr. Aria, pointed out that consultants must have evaluated the system before the rollout and during the rollout to offer their advice. Indeed, one such review was completed, as we know, by Gardner Incorporated, and they included that there were a dozen significant risks. Departments, for example, had not completed end-to-end testing. They had also not fully implemented the training programs that were required. And to make matters worse, as was pointed out by my colleague Mr. Whalen, the Gardner report was not made available to the minister until 6 months later. So this is how an article in yesterday's Ottawa Citizen characterizes the situation. Quote, "After nearly a decade in development, Phoenix suffered the flaw of unstoppable bureaucratic movement. The directors of the project seemed not inclined to pay much attention to last-minute advice unless it happened to line up with where they were going anyway." Which all brings me to the question I have today is, where are we going? And are we going to fix this? And I think that's on the minds of every Canadian that has come across this issue. So I've heard today that 700 employees have been hired. I've heard apologies. Are we going to strike the right balance? Are we going to strike the right balance? Because there were pay advisors that were decreased in 2014. Now you're hiring a whole bunch of new people to try to get caught up with all the transactions that have been not processed. And at the end of the day, I know that when you have a train that is moving and it is moving fast and you've got problems with the train, you can add people to it, but if you don't stop it and if you don't go back and fix the problem, then it's only going to get faster. And to me, this is a train that is continuing to speed up. When you look at the graphs in the Auditor General reports, you see how the situation has exasperated itself. Exponential increase in the number of public servants with outstanding pay requests and the number of outstanding pay requests in total. And the problem to me comes across as an unstoppable train. How are you, and perhaps you don't have an answer for this, but how are you going to strike the right balance with respect to training, with respect to the number of employees? This number of 540 million is a starting point. We've heard that in Australia it has cost over $1 billion. Canadians really want to know.
Thank you for the question, and I would say all of our efforts are focused on stabilizing the system. The management action plan that we've prepared in response to this first audit of the Auditor General lays out a number of concrete things that we are doing. We are building capacity, as Madame Lemay has mentioned and you referenced. We are also working across government and with the unions and with vendors to identify root causes within the system that are causing the pain points and the difficulties for processing transactions from an HR to pay perspective. So we are expecting a final report in the coming week from what we're calling root cause analysis that will be added to our suite of measures that we're looking at here. We are looking at some of the discrete processes like the acting process, terminations, transfer in and out of departments where we know we have significant issues at the pay center with processing and where we need to update the business process to streamline it to reflect the realities of today's workplace.
Have you engaged consultants at this point, particularly those that have already looked at the system and identified potential issues? Have you brought in outside people to come in and look at how this project can be better managed moving forward and what requirements need to be set?
Yes, we have. We have worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers to lay the groundwork for our suite of actions that we'll continue to add to as issues are resolved or arise.
Thank you very much, Mr. Linklater. We'll now move back to Monsieur Deltel.
Speaker. So we have seen since the beginning of this audit that twice, at two moments, the government was aware that there was some report, alarming report, not go so fast, and unfortunately the government decided to push on the button on February. But that was the first leg. The second leg occurred in April 26, 2016. Mais là, Monsieur le Président, c'est intéressant.
Mr. Chair, it gets interesting. A few days before, or 10 days before, we pushed on the button for the second time for Phase 2. There was a report from April 2016, and Ms. Minister was present. And this is what Ms.
Departments are brought on board on the new system. Public Service and Procurement Canada, which is a responsible department, is checking with every department and identifying the areas that we have problems with. We are feeding into them and alerting them if we are running into problems. If they feel we are not ready, they will delay. If they feel that 99% of it's going to work, then we will go forward. So, Madam, 99% of success?
Clearly not, sir.
Sorry?
Clearly not.
So, what happened?
At the time, with the knowledge that we had, we asked PSPC to check with every department. When the initial first wave happened, there was no sense of the magnitude of the problems that we were running into. The magnitude of the full problems became way more apparent by about June. By that time, the second phase had gone. The managers of the project felt that they were mitigating or managing the risks that were identified. That were the assurances given to the system.
Donc, on doit comprendre que
We should understand that when you made the decision, 99% of people were telling you everything's good. That's what happened when you made the decision at that time? That's exactly what you said. We'll move forward if 99% of things everyone is in agreement.
Is that they, meaning PSPC, will move forward only if they're 99% sure. At the time, they were sure it was going to work.
at 99%.
99% was used as an assurance that, and this is a system that manages the pay of public servants. It's a basic need for an employer to be able to pay its people. The risk on this one has to be very, very low. And that was understood. But at the time, the managers of this program felt that they had workarounds for some of the risks and they had management strategies for the risks. And that's what was presented to every department.
Madam, you're the one who set the bar at 99%. Was it 99% when you pushed the button for a second time?
I didn't push the button, sir, first of all. We are a central agency, but we have a big responsibility as the employer because basically if people don't get paid, of course it's our responsibility on the global sense. We made sure that everybody was aware and PSPC was aware that this was a no-fail project and they felt that they were ready.
If you're not the one who pushed the button, who did it?
The authority given by the government was the Minister of Public Services and Procurement Canada, according to the Treasury Board discussion and according to their legislative basis and the OICs that were given in 2009.
Okay. You're talking about a group. I'm talking about someone. Who's the one who called the shot?
The decision, according to the decisions from various cabinets and ordering councils and the legislation, the pay administration function rests with Public Services and Procurement Canada.
You don't answer my question, Madam. Who's the one who said to the minister, push the button, go?
The Minister of Public Services and Procurement, the Deputy Minister at the time would have been the one to give the advice.
The Deputy and who's that?
It was Mr. George Dupont.
Because, Mr. Speaker, why do I raise this question? And I have nothing personal about anybody. but it's time to have responsibility. It's time when someone called the shot and it is a wrong shot, it's time to identify exactly who's the wrong people who called the shot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deltel. We'll now move to Monsieur Lefebvre for a second minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I won't repeat a lot of the great comments that were done around the table, but I'll get straight to one of my major concerns. The Auditor General has raised the fact that the government is looking at spending over $500 million to correct this situation. And when we compare this situation to Australia, which was a lot smaller, basically one department, I think with the 70,000 individuals, it took them 7 years and more money than that. Now, when I hear from Mr. Linklander later that we are still in the root cause analysis report. We haven't completed that yet, so we're still looking at root causes, and we kind of identified them over the last period of time, but we still haven't finalized that. And when I look at your action plan, and we talked about the action plan here and the lack of one, and if it took 7 years for Australia to fix something that was fairly simple, complex, but smaller, let's put it that way. Now look at your action plan. If we can turn to your management action plan that you provided to us. Now look at for ease here, I'll look at report reference number 1.98. And the description of the final expected outcome reads as this. At the end of 2018, employees will receive timely and accurate pay in accordance with established targets, priorities, and service standards. Within this context, a number of pay requests in the queue declines, and timeliness and accuracy of pay processing consistently meets service standards. So basically, what you're telling us today in your action plan is that by the end of 2018, we should be on the road to full recovery, and everything will be on the road to having addressed all the issues. The root causes will be addressed. That means the capacity will be met. And so, but I'm very concerned. Because if another country, if a place like Australia took 7 years to fix an issue that was a lot smaller than this, probably and less complex because of all the collective agreements that we need to address, all the work that needs to be done, I can see why Canadians would also have a lot of doubt in this plan. Mr. Linklander, can you please explain it to us?
Mr. Chair, if I could go back to the OAG recommendation that talks about considering all outstanding pay requests and establishing priorities and meeting service standards. What PSPC has put in the MAP for 1.98 is to address that recommendation of the Auditor General. We do think that with the redeployment of additional resources and with moving through collective agreements, we will be able to reduce the pain points for staff over the course of 2018. That's part of the issue that we're dealing with. As part of the integrated team, we're looking at the HR to pay continuum, which will necessitate essentially looking at the connections between the 32 HR systems that are running across government, how they input into Phoenix, how the business processes for human resources operate, given that pay is a function of HR management, and understanding where to from this first volley, if you will, of dealing with pain points for staff, meeting service standards. Okay. Beyond that, where to.
Okay. So your root cause analysis will be, report is coming shortly. I would recommend, Mr. Chair, that in this committee, yes, we will have another session, another meeting, but I also recommend that in February or March we bring back and we follow systematically how this progresses, the action plan progresses actually, and we bring back witnesses because of l'ampleur de la situation.
The extent of the situation, the scope.
With respect, and maybe that's for the Treasury Board question. Another concern that I have is that we've seen this before at this committee. We actually had people with respect to for shared services, and the great challenges and difficulties that the transfer technology. So after 2 years of being here, I'm seeing a systemic problem of change management. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, and it's basically it's easily done. But it's as if there's a lot of missing links within our bureaucracy, which are professionals. Listen, when we go to meetings around the world representing Canada, I always talk about the amazing people that we have as public service, and that's what makes our country so strong. But at the same time, I'm just wondering, are they properly, do we have the proper tools? Because I'm just saying, again, with shared services, and now this, if there are, and there will be other projects, because technology always changes, I'm just saying that what are the tools, and do you have enough, like, is the training enough? Like, why do we have the systemic problem of change management within the Government of Canada?
I mean, we're out of time on that question, so if you, very quick answer if you have one.
You're absolutely correct. And do we have all of the tools? No. Are we in the process of getting the tools in place? Yes. But I would be happy to brief you in more detail because this is an absolutely critical issue.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now move to Mr. McCauley, please, for 5 minutes.
Great, thanks. Yaprik, you're going to excuse me, and I apologize. I can never pronounce your last name, so I'll just go by the first name.
First name is okay.
Mr. Chen brought up, and it's brought up the Gartner report, and it's surprising it's taking people so long in the press to report on it. Gartner report is very, very different than SI Systems. SI Systems, oh yeah, go ahead. Gartner was pretty damning. You read Gartner, and it's like, there's no way we should have gone forward. Now, we heard testimony that from Minister Foote when she was around, and Ms. LeMay, oh, we never saw Gartner. It was not presented to us. Just curious why Treasury Board wouldn't have given such a damning report over. And one of the things that Gartner very clearly states, training's not done, will not be done in time, even if they start now, and it will have consequences such as pay problems. So there we have it laid out right in front of us. PSPC says, oh, we never got Gartner. Like, why would we have not handed the right over to PSPC if what you're saying, everyone was talking together, meeting together. We had the meeting in committee that Mr. Deltel was mentioning about, you know, your comment, if it's not 99% ready, we won't go ahead. You had the Gartner report already saying that, but now we have PSPC saying we never received the Gartner report. Here's why we wouldn't have passed that on.
The Gartner report, the fact that we have contracted it out was we informed at that time our assistant deputy minister informed PSPC, and in January, I don't have the exact date.
You informed them that you had the report, or you had the contract?
No, we had contracted it out,
right.
And in January the report was sent to PSPC senior management.
Oh, so they did have it.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Ms. LeMay, I know you weren't here at the time, but why would PSPC have hidden that from?
Yeah. So I believe
because there's no reason. You read that report, anyone even with a grade 1 education reads that report and says, no bloody way are we going ahead with Phoenix. So why was it purposely withheld from the minister?
Okay, because I believe my colleague Gavin Liddy at the OGO committee said he did see the report, but the minister did not see it. So the report was exchanged between the OCG side of the House, I think, in Treasury Board, and our side, at the same time as the SI report was coming, at the same time as those meetings were happening, at the same time as the deputy meeting committee was happening. So all of this was coming together. The same responses that it was felt that all of these issues had been raised previously and addressed, and there was an overall collective sense that we were ready to go, and that's how Minister Foote at the time was briefed by the predecessor.
Right. Okay. The summary of Phoenix testing reports, which was brought up earlier, states, you know, a bunch of major issues, employee and acting situation, which was one of the big problems with Phoenix. You know, we knew about it January 20th. Input of late transactions will result in deductions. Phoenix do not pay supervisory differential, another problem, is identified. All this identified at the same time Gartner identifies. At the same time, January 13th, there is the meeting with the CFOs and head of HR. Under Treasury Board states, again, correction services, and we know one of the problems with Phoenix is it doesn't do shift work properly. So 50% failure rate with correction services, which does shift work. Coast Guard issues, we know Coast Guard's a problem. So we have all the CFOs identifying the issue. We have the summary Phoenix testing results saying it's a mess. And we have Gartner. And again, Gartner's so simply laid out. It's a do not do it, the training's not done, all these problems. So much evidence saying it's not ready, don't do it. And it seems everything was hidden from the minister. Like, Why?
So at the same time,
no one
you
in their
remember...
right mind would have read any of this and said, oh, like it's clear it's months and months away from being finished, and yet it's like, let's go ahead.
So you'll remember that we did have another report that was clearing us to go, but as far as the other items...
SI Systems identified a bunch of problems. SI Systems does say, yes, it's ready, but
so those
you've got all these other things, your own staff, all the CFOs.
So we had, at the time, it was felt that there was work, I'll call them workarounds for all of these things, that there was capacity to be able to handle this, and that was addressed. That goes to what I was saying earlier. In my opinion, the cumulative risk and the holistic view of this project was missing. We were looking at this like every single item and mitigating every single item. So late actings, yes, and it was planned for the enhancement to be automated later, and in the meantime that we could do workarounds.
Well,
we're out of time on that, Mr. McCauley. We'll go to Mr. Whalen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we'll try to take a different tack here in terms of the contract management and how we move forward, because pay will continually be changing, and there will continually be small aspects of the system. Maybe a new operating system will come on board. Maybe there'll be a new collective, a completely new bargaining unit might come into existence. There's going to be, and the more we can modularize and the more we can circumscribe each individual problem and deal with it specifically, I think the more robust the system can be, and the better able the department would be to outsource and to get competitive bids on smaller individual projects. It's something we've talked about in our Operations and Estimates Committee as well, taking an agile approach to change management. One of the things that might impede that is the existing contract, and I was just wondering whether or not the current contract in place with IBM and with PeopleSoft for the software, who owns the customizations that have been made to implement all the different specialized rules within the federal government's pay system within PeopleSoft? Does the federal government own that IP? Okay, so that's encouraging. Ms. Beltatsioglu, I know I always have a difficult time with your name. I'm sorry for that. In terms of your reporting, you're going to be reporting back on the standardized service levels by June 2016 and by the costs of pay implementation by May 2018. Are you going to be able to break that down for us on a piece-by-piece basis? So how much of the costs and time and energy is being associated with implementing collective agreement X? How much time is being used for collective agreement Y? How much time is going to, and energy and money is being spent on normal pay backlog? Is it going to be department by department? How are we going to be seeing this information so we can get a sense of how each individual project and problem and process feeds into the overall cost of the Phoenix system and the pay generally? Or is that not going to be transparent to us and we'll just be getting a grand total? I just want to know what we're going to be seeing.
Okay, one commitment to this is that it will be transparent. If the committee has specific categories you want us to survey, we will do that. And I just heard you list a number of them. What we will report on is originally how much money was allocated for Phoenix. Not only consolidation, but also the system. We will break that down. How much money was transferred from departments to PSPC for pay functioning? How much was foregone savings because the government expected savings to be realized, which got put back into the system? Since the problems become clear, how much money has been allocated and how much has been spent? So we have those numbers. The issue that the Auditor General is putting, his number of 540, is not a number that is concrete. It is, as he put it, it's an estimate. So we have to go to every department and get the actuals, and basically it is it's a Excel sheet process because everybody's working on different systems, gives you a sense. Mm-hmm. When we get them, we're going to model them, and we're going to put them. The other thing we're going to
Thank you. That's very interesting, Ms. Matatsigu. I've got a good sense now that the reporting that we're going to get is going to be comprehensive, and we'll have a good sense.
Also, we will have a framework
sorry,
for
I
the
just
future.
need to move on to the next aspect, but it's great. I've got some confidence there that in May we'll see some good numbers. In terms of the over 500,000 incident backlog that remains in the system, my understanding is that a lot of that relates to implementation of the new collective agreements, retroactive pay, and I really have two questions on this line for either Ms. LeMay or Mr. Linklater. One, are we trying to do things to avoid retroactive acting pay and other things which are non-standard in the system in the collective agreement negotiation process, so that going forward we have more transparent type of pay regime that's more industry standard, that reflects the type of bonusing that people should receive, and that can be done without retroactive adjustments on a going forward basis in a more easily managed way. And I guess the second aspect of that question, so aside from the negotiations, why are we not just getting more people on this file now to clear the backlog rather than waiting to reallocate people in the future? We have an existing backlog that we know about. Why do we not just outsource this to 1,000 boffins at IBM who can come in as experts and just fix this problem? Why are we waiting until some unknown point in the future to fix the problem that we have on our plate now that can be solved with effort?
Can I answer the collective agreements? We are responsible as the employer, the negotiations of the agreements. The reason why this collective agreement is such a big load is because the previous agreements had expired. So we were automatically working on retroactivity. We had no choice, because you can't say you get nothing for 2 years and then we start to pay you on a future basis. So we had to go, and it is a negotiation, and we did that with good faith with the unions. Hopefully going forward, and we start as early as next year, the next round, because these agreements are, the ones that we just negotiated are going to expire. We are going to look at future looking, so not to put further burden on PSBC.
The question I wanted answered didn't get answered.
Well, now the final question to Mr. Deltel. I will warn the committee that we are going to go in camera for a very short period of committee business dealing with a letter that is to be forwarded on. So to the committee and to all those here at the conclusion of this meeting, please, you're going to have to exit very quickly. Mr. Deltel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to inform the committee that I will share my time with Mr. McCauley. Madame Lemay, vous avez dit dans vos mots d'introduction et très rapidement.
Ms. May, you said that you did not have the necessary resources to respond to the problems that were caused by Phoenix, namely because there were 700 people that were fired before April 2016. These 700 people who were let go, how many involved the people that were involved in December, January, February, March of 2016? In fact, there were 1,300 people who were let go and rehired 700 people, roughly. There's a 600-person difference. During the last wave, when we went live, there were 989 people who were let go. And there were 2 other previous waves, and the last one involved 225. That's very interesting, but that wasn't my question. How many jobs were ended in December, January, February, March, April, and I don't have the figures with me, but there were 3 waves, but I could give you more details.
These questions have been asked, and we would really appreciate if you can forward any types of answers to us at a later date. How many officials were fired on performance, not necessarily just on the switchover? How many officials were demoted? How many executives received performance pay and/or bonuses? Indeed, were there still bonuses paid out through this exercise? Mr. Deltel.
I will.
Mr. McCauley.
I just want to follow up on the amount of pay advisors. You know, it's funny, you first started blaming the issue on the pay advisors November 29th a year ago. However, June 2016, April 2016, March 2016, September, July. None of these times you actually mentioned the pay advisors. I'm just curious, an entire year went by before you came up with this idea of, oh, it's all because we laid off the pay advisors as the big issue. Never mentioned before. Never came up, let me finish, never came up in any of the other reports, like the Gartner report, the SI systems. When you read through the whole stack of ATIPs we did, it actually stated at Miramichi, in one of the reports are ready to go, we have enough staff. Now, you've stated, okay, it's because of pay advisors. Here we are now, 2 years after. We have more pay advisors in Miramichi and throughout the government as we did before we actually started the process. How confident are you that, this is the main issue?
So let me be very, very clear on this. I've said it from the beginning. I'm sorry if I didn't say it.
Let me correct you. You've never once in committee until November 29th of last year brought that up. So all the other previous appearances by yourself, it never came up.
So I apologize if it wasn't clear, because it was an issue from the beginning. We started satellite offices. We had a "We Hire" sign starting on June 17. We've tried so many ways to get compensation advisors. We had to work with the unions to be able to bring back people. We had a letter of the clerk. We hired, there's nobody left in terms of compensation advisors. It's been a struggle to get the people and to onboard them. But I want to be clear, to me, it is the number one issue to take the pain away from the people. Because if we had 700 people trained when we went live, we wouldn't be having these discussions.
If we knew about it, why did we go ahead and do it?
Well, you know how the workforce works. When you let go people, it's 22 months before you let go somebody that you have to tell them that their job is affected.
Okay. But if we knew there was going to be a problem, why did we go ahead and press the button?
People had started leaving. People were already in other jobs. People were already ready to go. So at the time, all the risks were assessed. Everything that you raised with the colleagues, we talked to departments, they were having less and less staff to be able to do pay. So all of these things were counted into account in the decision. But I'm convinced that if we had 700 people fully trained when we went live, we'd still have efficiency issues, HR process issues, but people would not feel the pain the way they feel it today.
And you still would have had the backlog.
I think our time is up, Mr. McCauley. I want to thank all of you. I'm not so certain that I feel better after this meeting than I did when we began. And so I think you can assume that you will be invited back fairly soon, and that we will want to see some of those answers prior to that. So as soon as we can get those answers sent in, that would be very much appreciated. And we are going to suspend this part of the meeting. Please make an exit as soon as possible. We go in camera, meaning every committee member is allowed one staffer plus your whips. So we are suspended.
you.